Welcome to Eat Sleep Crime. I am Jack Wilson, and I'll be your host for tonight. As the rain falls gently outside, relax your mind, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and sink into the shadows of today's true crime story. There is nothing to fear. At least not right now. Sleep well, if you can. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, a familiar fragrance that once held only comforting memories. Now, it carried the weight of unspoken secrets, the ghosts of a past Sarah had tried to bury. Havenwood, her childhood home, hadn't changed much on the surface. The same quaint clapboard houses lined the streets, the same sleepy Main Street hummed with the gentle rhythm of small-town life. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, Sarah felt a disquieting undercurrent, a tremor of unease that vibrated through the very soil. It was a feeling she'd carried for 2 decades, a nagging doubt that had festered into a full-blown obsession. She sat in the rented cottage, the worn floral wallpaper a stark contrast to the sterile environment of her city apartment. The cottage held a faint scent of lavender and old wood, an aroma that both soothed and unsettled her. In her lap rested a battered box, its contents more precious than any family heirloom. The original police interview tapes from the investigation into the death of Mr. Silas Blackwood, her beloved high school guidance counselor. 20 years ago, his death had been ruled a suicide, a swift and tragic end to a life that had touched so many. But Sarah never truly believed it. She'd always felt a disquiet, a subtle dissonance in the official narrative. The details, once brushed aside as inconsequential grief-stricken memories, now formed the cornerstone of a burgeoning investigation. The tapes, obtained after months of bureaucratic wrangling and persistent pleading, were her only hope of finding the truth. The label read simply, Blackwood Case. Interview transcripts. The tape hiss crackled into life, the sound a sinister counterpoint to the gentle evening breeze sighing through the open window. The voice of Sheriff Buckley, a gruff, yet strangely comforting presence from her youth, filled the room. His voice, now aged and weary on the recording, began with the formalities. The interviews were conducted with students, teachers, and the counselor's family, a tapestry of accounts woven together to create a seemingly complete picture of a distraught man who took his own life. Initially, the accounts seemed to confirm the suicide conclusion. Statements of Mr. Blackwood's despondency, his mounting pressures, the subtle hints of depression, all painting a picture that matched the official police report. But then, Sarah's trained ear, honed by years of investigative reporting, picked up on the subtle inconsistencies. A slight hesitation in a witness's testimony, a misplaced detail in another's recollection. The discrepancies were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye or ear, but they were there. A faint tremor in a voice, a fleeting glance of uncertainty. They were the cracks in the foundation of the official narrative. One student's description of Mr. Blackwood on the day of his death contradicted another's. One remembered a calm demeanor, another a sense of agitation. One teacher claimed to have seen him late in his office that evening, but another stated he had left early. These weren't major contradictions, but each small deviation, each subtle incongruity, chipped away at the narrative's certainty. Sarah rewound the tapes, replaying segments, analyzing every inflection, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. She made notes in a worn leather-bound journal, its pages already filling with observations, speculations, and questions. The journal had been a gift from Mr. Blackwood, its pages filled with his neat cursive, once offering guidance and support, now documenting her efforts to uncover the truth behind his death. The irony wasn't lost on her. As she delved deeper, the tapes began to reveal something far more sinister than a simple suicide. The inconsistencies weren't accidental. They were deliberate, carefully constructed to conceal something far more disturbing. The interviews became less about a troubled man and more about a web of secrets and concealed resentments. She recognized some of the voices, the hesitant tones of classmates, the clipped responses of teachers. It was as though Havenwood's quiet facade hid a well of dark secrets. The tapes stirred up memories of her own high school days. She remembered Mr. Blackwood's kind smile, his unwavering support, his quiet wisdom. He'd been more than just a counselor. He'd been a mentor, a friend, a guiding light during the turbulent years of adolescence. Now, the memories were overlaid with a chilling layer of doubt. Had she missed something crucial then? Had her perception of him, and the town, been hopelessly skewed? The tapes ended with a final interview, a fragmented conversation with a reluctant witness whose name she couldn't quite make out. The audio was muddied, static filled the gaps, and only a few words were clearly audible. It sounded like an argument, laced with anger and veiled threats. The fragmented conversation was unnerving, leaving Sarah with a gnawing sense of incompleteness. The evening drew to a close, the shadows lengthening in the cottage. Sarah finally pushed the tapes aside. The weight of what she had unearthed pressed upon her. The idyllic haven of her childhood memories now seemed a stage set for something far more sinister. She knew she couldn't stop here. The discrepancies were far too significant to ignore. The truth was out there, hidden somewhere within the confines of Havenwood's seemingly perfect walls. And she was determined to uncover it, no matter the personal cost. The next step was to revisit the people whose voices filled the tapes, her old classmates, teachers, and the remnants of Mr. Blackwood's own life. She felt a familiar tremor of fear. Havenwood hadn't felt like home in years, and the shadows it cast seemed to stretch into an uncertain future. She felt watched, the quiet creak of the cottage's floorboards echoing in the stillness of the night, each sound a potential intrusion. Yet, the need to understand, to find answers, outweighed the fear. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun glinting off the dew-kissed leaves. But for Sarah, the idyllic scene held a new, sinister meaning. Havenwood's quiet charm felt like a carefully constructed illusion, a mask hiding the secrets it held so tightly within. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that the journey ahead would be perilous, a descent into a darkness that she wasn't sure she would survive. But she had to try. For Mr. Blackwood. For herself. For the truth. The investigation had begun. The worn cassette tape spun in the ancient tape deck, the faint whirring a counterpoint to the insistent ticking of the cottage's grandfather clock. Sarah traced the faded inscription on the box. Blackwood Case. Interview transcripts. Her fingertip lingering on the embossed lettering. The familiar scent of lavender, once comforting, now felt thick and cloying, a perfume masking something darker. She rewound the tape to the interview with Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Blackwood's landlady. The old woman's voice, brittle and reedy, recalled the counselor's quiet solitude, his habit of working late into the night. But there was a flicker of something else, something Sarah had missed initially, a barely perceptible hesitation before she mentioned his fondness for evening walks. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. Evening walks. The official reports stated he'd been found in his study, the scene staged to look like a suicide. But if he'd been on an evening walk, the timeline didn't fit. Sarah pulled out her journal, its leather cover smooth under her fingers, the gift from Mr. Blackwood himself. A symbol of a past she now viewed with a jaded lens. She scribbled a note. Henderson, evening walks, discrepancy. The next interview was with Ms. Albright, the school librarian. Her voice was crisp, professional, almost devoid of emotion. She described Mr. Blackwood as a dedicated teacher, a man deeply committed to his students. Yet, Sarah detected a subtle stiffness in her tone, a guarded quality that suggested unspoken knowledge. Ms. Albright mentioned having seen Mr. Blackwood arguing with someone on the phone the afternoon before his death, but she couldn't recall the person's voice. The memory flitted back to Sarah, a fragmented scene from her own high school days. She'd seen Mr. Blackwood pacing in the hallway, his face drawn and tight, speaking urgently into a phone. His voice hadn't carried, but the intensity of his gestures, the frustration etched on his features, were etched vividly in her memory. She dismissed it then as stress, the pressure of his job. Now, the memory felt sinister, a harbinger of the events to come. As Sarah continued to analyze the interviews, a pattern began to emerge. While most of the testimonies painted a portrait of a depressed man succumbing to despair, subtle inconsistencies riddled the accounts. A student's recollection of the counselor's clothing contradicted another's. A teacher's timeline for the day of his death clashed with another's. These weren't vast disparities, but like tiny cracks in a dam, they threatened to unravel the official narrative. Flashbacks to her senior year washed over Sarah. Havenwood High School shimmered in her memory. The worn wooden desks, the scent of chalk dust and old paper, the hushed whispers in the hallways. She remembered Mr. Blackwood's calm presence in his office, the comforting aroma of old books and pipe tobacco. He'd always had a keen eye, a knack for discerning her unspoken anxieties. He'd helped her through a difficult breakup, offered guidance when her future felt uncertain, his advice always delivered with gentle understanding. Now that gentle guidance felt tainted, overshadowed by the shadow of doubt. One interview stood out, a particularly muddled recording of a conversation between Mr. Blackwood and an unidentified male voice. The audio was filled with static, obscuring the details. But Sarah could discern fragments of heated words, accusatory tones, a hushed threat. The male voice was gruff, aggressive, laced with anger. Sarah enhanced the audio on her laptop, using noise reduction software, but the words remained elusive, fragments of a sentence here and there. It sounded like a desperate confrontation, a battle fueled by simmering resentment and veiled threats. As days bled into nights, Sarah's investigation intensified. She started interviewing her former classmates. The reunions were strained, filled with awkward silences and hesitant smiles. Many people avoided eye contact, their responses tight-lipped and carefully crafted. The idyllic charm of Havenwood had vanished, replaced by a pervasive sense of unease. Their words were a reflection of the town itself, a picture postcard facade masking a deep-seated darkness. Each conversation was a revelation, each carefully chosen word, a cryptic clue. The conversations revealed a complex network of hidden resentments, old rivalries, and long-buried secrets. One classmate remembered Mr. Blackwood having a secret life. Another mentioned a mysterious woman visiting him late at night. A third confessed a conflict with the counselor over a disciplinary issue. These revelations painted a different picture of the man she remembered, a man more complex and less innocent than she'd imagined. The closer Sarah got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. She felt watched, shadowed, a sense of being followed in the quiet streets of Havenwood. The windows of the cottage seemed to reflect more than the moonlit night. It felt as though a pair of eyes were staring back at her. Her apartment in the city felt distant, a haven now out of reach. The feeling that the small town she once held as a sanctuary was now turning sinister grew with each passing day. The mystery was slowly beginning to unravel, but with every piece of the puzzle that fell into place, more questions arose. The inconsistencies in the witness testimonies weren't random. They were deliberate, carefully constructed to conceal a larger truth. Someone in Havenwood was protecting a secret, and Sarah was determined to uncover it. But as she delved deeper into the darkness surrounding Mr. Blackwood's death, she realized that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could expose her to a hidden danger more threatening than she could have ever imagined. The quiet town she knew was crumbling, revealing a more sinister truth beneath the charming exterior. And in the center of it all stood Mr. Blackwood, a man whose life and death held the key to Havenwood's darkest secrets. The truth, she realized, might be more terrifying than the doubt itself. The chipped formica tabletop of the Havenwood diner felt strangely familiar, yet alien. Sarah stirred her lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste mirroring the apprehension churning in her stomach. Across from her sat Mark Olson, quarterback of the Havenwood Hawks, his broad shoulders filling the booth. 20 years had softened the sharp angles of his face, replacing the arrogant swagger of his youth with a weary kindliness. He'd been one of the more welcoming faces from her old class. "Haven't changed a bit, Sarah," Mark said, a genuine smile finally breaking through his guarded demeanor. "Except maybe a little sharper." Sarah chuckled, a nervous sound that betrayed her inner turmoil. "Sharp enough to stir up some old ghosts, it seems." Mark's smile faded. "You're digging into Mr. Blackwood's death again." His voice was low, a subtle shift from the jovial tone he'd initially adopted. Sarah nodded, avoiding his gaze. "There are inconsistencies in the official report. I need to talk to people who knew him." The conversation meandered, touching on shared memories of high school, the Friday night football games, the awkward school dances, the bittersweet ache of first loves. But beneath the surface of nostalgia, a current of unease flowed. Mark was evasive about certain aspects of Mr. Blackwood's life, his answers carefully measured, his eyes darting around the diner as if expecting to be overheard. He mentioned seeing Mr. Blackwood arguing intensely on the phone a few times, but refused to speculate on the subject of the argument. He claimed he never saw anything unusual, that Mr. Blackwood had seemed stressed but not suicidal. The carefully constructed responses felt rehearsed, each word a brick wall shielding something he refused to share. Later that day, Sarah found herself standing outside the imposing brick facade of Havenwood High. The school hadn't changed much, still exuding that same air of quiet, almost sepulchral dignity. She found herself drawn to Mr. Blackwood's old office, a small book-lined room overlooking the schoolyard. She didn't enter, the memories too potent, the ghost of his calming presence too palpable. Instead, she decided to approach someone she'd always found somewhat intriguing, Jessica Riley, the class valedictorian, now a successful lawyer in the city. Jessica's home was a sprawling colonial, a stark contrast to Sarah's modest rental. The manicured lawn and gleaming windows projected an image of polished success, a sharp contrast to the quiet desperation Sarah felt bubbling beneath the surface. Jessica's welcome was polite but distant, her eyes guarded, her smile tight. The conversation was stilted, filled with long pauses and careful silences. She recalled Mr. Blackwood as a stern but fair teacher, a man dedicated to his profession. However, she admitted to having a minor disagreement with him about a college recommendation, a disagreement she hadn't previously shared with anyone. It was a subtle detail, insignificant on its own, yet it added another layer to the complex tapestry of events surrounding his death. The next encounter proved to be more revealing, yet infinitely more unnerving. Sarah met with Emily Carter, who'd always been a bit of an outcast, a quiet observer of the school's social dynamics. Emily, now a recluse living alone in a dilapidated house on the edge of town, was markedly different from the other classmates she had spoken to. Her eyes were haunted, her demeanor deeply disturbed. She spoke in hushed tones, her words punctuated by long, trembling silences. She spoke of Mr. Blackwood's kindness, his genuine concern for his students. Yet, she confessed to witnessing a heated argument between Mr. Blackwood and a mysterious woman in the school parking lot the night before he died. The woman, she described, was tall and slender, with fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes. She'd only caught glimpses, but the intensity of the argument had left a lasting impression. "I saw her hit him," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. A hard shove, almost like a push. The revelation sent a jolt through Sarah. The official report stated that Mr. Blackwood had been alone in his study. Emily's testimony directly contradicted that. But Emily was also known for her imaginative flair, a tendency to embellish details. Even her memories seemed a little hazy. This made her testimony seem less credible. Over the next few days, Sarah continued her interviews, her investigation leading her down a twisting path of conflicting accounts and half-truths. Each encounter added a new piece to the puzzle, but also raised more questions than answers. She learned of a secret gambling debt, an affair, a whispered threat, all pieces of information that seemed to point towards foul play instead of suicide. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. She noticed a black car parked across the street from her rental, its occupants observing her movements. Her phone calls were interrupted by strange static. The shadows seemed to lengthen, the silence heavy with unspoken menace. Havenwood, once a haven of childhood memories, had become a place of fear. The idyllic facade had crumbled, revealing a town steeped in secrets. A town where the past clung to the present like a suffocating shroud. The welcoming smiles of her former classmates had been replaced by wary glances, hushed whispers, and a sense of collective fear. Sarah felt like she was walking a tightrope, balanced precariously between revelation and ruin. The more she learned, the more she realized she was treading into dangerous territory, a place where the truths held far more dangerous consequences than the lies. Her life felt increasingly threatened in the charming but sinister haven, Havenwood. The investigation that began with curiosity had transformed into a desperate quest for survival, a race against time to unravel the secrets before it was too late. The idyllic charm of her hometown was rapidly dissolving, revealing something far more sinister. And Sarah, once a simple observer, was now standing right in the heart of it all. Her past and present entwined in a dangerous, inescapable web. The worn cassette tape hissed and crackled, spitting out a distorted fragment of Mr. Blackwood's voice, a strained, almost pleading tone that wasn't captured in the official police report. Sarah leaned closer to the small portable player, the faint scent of dust and decay clinging to the aged plastic. This was the crux of her investigation, the raw material that contradicted the neatly packaged narrative of suicide. She rewound the tape, the grainy audio a soundtrack to her growing unease. The interview detailed a series of tense conversations, hushed phone calls late at night, veiled threats that suggested a life far more turbulent than the picture painted by the town's collective memory. The police, it seemed, had neatly swept these details under the rug. That evening, she found herself at the Havenwood Country Club, a place she hadn't stepped foot in since graduation. It was a different world from the dilapidated houses on the edge of town. A world of manicured lawns, expensive cars, and carefully cultivated smiles. She was meeting with another classmate, Robert Jenkins, the class clown, now a successful businessman with a reputation for sharp deals and sharper elbows. He was more jovial than Mark, more forthcoming with memories of high school, but even his laughter held a nervous edge, a tremor of unease that Sarah sensed rather than saw. He recounted how Mr. Blackwood had often intervened in minor squabbles among the students. Robert, however, shared a memory that made Sarah sit bolt upright. He recalled a particularly heated confrontation between Mr. Blackwood and Jessica Riley. It wasn't just a disagreement about a college recommendation as Jessica had mentioned, but a full-blown argument involving accusations and raised voices. Robert described Jessica's face, red and contorted with fury. He couldn't quite remember the content of their argument, but remembered the raw intensity of it. He vaguely remembered the argument happening after school in Mr. Blackwood's office, just before he went home for the evening. It was like something out of a movie, Robert said, his voice dropping to a low murmur. I've never seen Jessica that angry, never. This new piece of information threw Sarah's investigation into a disarray. Two key figures, Jessica and Mr. Blackwood, were involved in a heated argument shortly before his death. It was a significant detail that the police had somehow overlooked. It raised questions about Jessica's initial statement to the authorities, the one filled with carefully chosen words and omissions. Sarah's next interview was with Karen Miller, cheerleader who dated Mark Olson throughout high school. Karen, now divorced and working as a bartender, was guarded, her responses clipped and guarded. She seemed to recall Mr. Blackwood giving her harsh advice after one of her performances. It seemed a minor issue, frustration in her tone when she remembered it was something that would be noted by Sarah. She remembered him being hard on her, but she never said anything directly that implied resentment. The resentment seemed to be veiled. Her body language suggested otherwise. Her initial hesitation and a subtle flinch when she remembered the conversation with Mr. Blackwood implied far more than she was willing to reveal. The recurring theme in these conversations wasn't just veiled resentment, but a sense of collective guilt, a palpable weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. Sarah realized that Havenwood wasn't just a town with secrets. It was a town where everyone held a piece of the puzzle, a piece they were reluctant to share. She felt the weight of the town's collective secrets pressing down on her. The carefully cultivated image of Havenwood as an idyllic small town, a sanctuary of peaceful coexistence, was shattering before her eyes. Beneath the veneer of civility, there was a simmering cauldron of resentments, rivalries, and long-buried grudges. She had to wonder if they were somehow connected to the mystery surrounding Mr. Blackwood's death. Then there was the case of Emily Carter. Sarah had to revisit Emily and find out more about the woman with the fiery red hair. She found Emily huddled in her dilapidated house, her eyes even more haunted than before. Emily was reluctant to speak more about the woman, but under Sarah's persistent questioning, Emily recalled seeing the woman leaving Mr. Blackwood's car. The car was a classic black Mustang. The woman had not been seen by anyone. It seemed like the woman simply vanished after the incident. Sarah's investigation took a sharp turn. She focused on the woman with fiery red hair, tracing the few clues Emily had provided. She spent hours at the local library, poring over old yearbooks and town archives, seeking any trace of this mysterious woman. She found nothing. It was as though this person had never existed. Sarah discovered that the black Mustang was registered to someone named Arthur Blackwood, with an address outside of town. Arthur Blackwood was Mr. Blackwood's elder brother, known to be a recluse. This discovery added another layer of intrigue to the investigation. The possibility of a family connection now played a role in the mystery. Sarah's thoughts raced. Was there a family secret? A long-standing feud or family conflict? The possibility of foul play loomed large. She revisited her interviews. She noticed that each interview seemed to be connected to a timeline. Robert's encounter seemed to be the last interaction Mr. Blackwood had with someone before he went home that evening. This was followed by a heated argument, as described by Robert, which was then followed by Emily's observation of the argument in the parking lot and the mysterious woman leaving the scene. This was followed by Mr. Blackwood's death. The clues seemed to point towards foul play, but it was also possible that this was a series of coincidences that were misconstrued as a result of her bias to suspect foul play. The mystery remained unsolved. However, Sarah found the need to delve deeper. She had to figure out what was going on. The answers could not remain hidden any longer. The truth, she sensed, was buried somewhere in the depths of these hidden resentments, these unspoken conflicts, and this web of lies. The closer she got, the more dangerous it became, a perilous dance on the edge of discovery and potential ruin. She continued her search. Her resolve, hardened by the potential danger, was unshaken. She had to know the truth. The fate of Havenwood's darkest secrets hung precariously in the balance, and Sarah was at the epicenter of its unraveling. The next morning, Sarah found herself drawn back to Mark Olson's house. The initial interview had left her unsettled. Mark's carefully constructed composure, his clipped responses, and the subtle tremor in his hands when he spoke of Mr. Blackwood, all spoke of something he wasn't revealing. His initial denial of any significant interaction with the deceased guidance counselor felt hollow, a carefully rehearsed performance. She approached his house cautiously, the morning sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy that had once pulsed within these walls during their high school years. The silence was unsettling, a prelude to the unease that coiled within her. This time, Mark answered the door himself, his eyes widening slightly upon seeing her. He seemed surprised by her return, his carefully constructed facade momentarily slipping. His usual cheerful greeting was absent, replaced by a tense stiffness in his posture. "Sarah," he said, his voice tight. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Mark, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. There are a few things I need to clarify. She proceeded cautiously, focusing on the inconsistencies in his previous statement, pressing him on details he had glossed over. He fidgeted, his gaze darting nervously around the room, avoiding direct eye contact. His answers became increasingly evasive, his explanations rambling and unconvincing. He kept mentioning his alibi, his presence at a college football game on the night of Mr. Blackwood's death. However, his response lacked the confidence of someone who possessed a genuine alibi. There was too much hesitation, too many nervous glances. As their conversation progressed, Sarah felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, a feeling of being watched. She glanced around the room, but saw nothing. Yet, the feeling persisted, a sense of unease intensifying with each passing moment. It was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a change too subtle to articulate, yet powerful enough to send a shiver down her spine. Later, as she drove back to her rented cottage, she noticed a dark sedan trailing her. It kept a discreet distance, never getting too close, yet always in her peripheral vision. Her heart pounded in her chest, the fear she tried to suppress finally breaking through. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a dangerous game, and she was playing it alone. The feeling of being followed intensified over the next few days. The dark sedan became a constant presence, a silent, ominous shadow clinging to her. She changed her routes, altering her routine, but the car always seemed to anticipate her movements. The feeling of vulnerability was palpable, a chilling realization of her isolation and the potential danger she faced. This constant surveillance was a new twist in her investigation, a tangible manifestation of the unspoken threat lingering in Havenwood. The town's idyllic facade seemed to be crumbling, revealing a darker, more sinister underbelly that was actively working to prevent her from uncovering the truth. Sarah began to question whether her investigation had alerted someone to her presence, someone who was willing to take drastic measures to protect a dark secret. The sense of foreboding grew stronger with each passing day, the fear gnawing at her like a persistent, insidious disease. Despite the fear, Sarah's determination remained unshaken. The raw, distorted audio of Mr. Blackwood's voice on the old cassette tape, his desperate pleas for help, those sounds fueled her resolve. She couldn't abandon her investigation. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. The potential consequences were immense, but the thought of not pursuing this further was equally daunting. She decided to take a calculated risk, focusing her investigation on Mark. His evasiveness and the constant surveillance made him the most significant suspect. She re-examined every detail of his interaction with Mr. Blackwood, delving into school records, searching for any evidence of a conflict or hidden resentment. She unearthed information about a significant disagreement between Mark and Mr. Blackwood, an argument that revolved around Mark's academic performance and the pressure to obtain a scholarship. The argument wasn't mentioned in the initial police report, a critical omission that raised serious concerns. She also discovered that Mark had borrowed a substantial sum of money from Mr. Blackwood, a fact he conveniently left out of their conversation. This financial connection could have been the motive, the missing link in the puzzle. Sarah's investigation also revealed that Mark had secretly applied for a prestigious scholarship, an opportunity that Mr. Blackwood had initially opposed because of Mark's poor grades. Mark's sudden rage and anger could have been sparked by this. This conflict could have escalated into a confrontation, a heated argument that ended tragically. This finding added another piece to the puzzle, painting a much darker picture of Mark and his interactions with Mr. Blackwood. The evidence, although circumstantial, pointed undeniably towards Mark being more than just a witness. He seemed like a prime suspect. The risk was escalating. The feeling of being watched was more intense now, constant reminder of the danger she faced. Yet, Sarah pressed on, her fear tempered by a fierce determination to unveil the truth, no matter the cost. Each step closer to the truth seemed to draw her deeper into a vortex of deceit and danger, a desperate dance between revelation and ruin. The game had clearly become a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where the stakes were nothing less than her life and the exposure of Havenwood's most guarded secrets. The pressure was palpable, the weight of the investigation intensifying. She had to proceed carefully. Otherwise, this relentless pursuit of the truth could lead to catastrophic results. But the truth, it seemed, was a shadowy, elusive figure that refused to reveal itself easily. It hid within the shadows of a small town, shrouded in a web of lies and deceit, guarded by the residents who were determined to keep their secrets. Sarah's determination was unwavering, however. The relentless pursuit of truth had taken a dangerous turn. The small town of Havenwood, once idyllic and peaceful, had revealed a dark underbelly and a sinister side that was lurking beneath its seemingly serene surface. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of secrets, lies, and hidden resentments. The town's secrets, she realized, weren't just confined to the past. They were alive, breathing, and actively working to silence her. Her investigation was no longer just about uncovering the truth about Mr. Blackwood's death. It had become a fight for her own survival. The line between investigator and target was blurring, and Sarah knew that with each passing day, the stakes were getting higher. The old cassette player hummed, a low, insistent drone that filled the cramped confines of Sarah's rented cottage. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and mildew, a fitting atmosphere for the task at hand. She replayed the tapes, this time armed with a newfound understanding of Havenwood's intricate web of relationships, its simmering resentments, and its carefully cultivated secrets. The initial police interviews, once a source of frustration, now held a potential wealth of information, each word, each pause, each subtle shift in tone, potentially a clue to the truth. She focused on Mark Olson's interview. His initial calm demeanor, previously deemed suspicious, now seemed almost calculated. Sarah rewound the tape to the section where he discussed his alibi, the college football game. She listened intently, playing back the section multiple times. This time, she noticed something she had missed before. A barely perceptible tremor in his voice as he described his arrival at the stadium. A fleeting hesitation, a subtle crack in his carefully constructed narrative. It was almost inaudible, easily missed on a first listen, but now, in the context of her growing suspicion, it echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Next, she turned to Bethany's interview. Bethany, with her quiet demeanor and sharp intelligence, had always seemed to operate on the periphery, a silent observer of the town's drama. Yet, Sarah now suspected that her silence was anything but passive. Bethany's interview revealed a surprising detail, a strained relationship with Mr. Blackwood, stemming from a perceived favoritism towards other students. While her resentment was never explicitly stated, Sarah heard it in the tone of her voice, a hidden bitterness that gave a deeper meaning to her previous observations. Sarah then revisited the interviews of other classmates, meticulously searching for anything that could connect the dots. The tapes became a tapestry woven with subtle threads of resentment, jealousy, and long-held grudges. Each interview was a puzzle piece, its meaning only becoming apparent when viewed in the context of the whole. She listened to the subtle cues, the vocal inflections, the hesitations, the things that the original investigators might have missed, the details that were now providing crucial links. In the midst of her investigation, she remembered a conversation with her old friend, Jessica, who had mentioned a clandestine meeting between Mr. Blackwood and Mark just a week before the death. It had been a casual remark at the time, but now it felt heavy with significance. Havenwood, once a place of comforting familiarity, now felt alien and deceptive. Every friendly smile now seemed suspect, every casual conversation a potential front. The town, once idyllic and peaceful, was now a stage for a grim drama, with every resident potentially a player with something to hide. Sarah's once familiar surroundings now held an underlying current of threat and distrust. The quaint houses, lined up neatly on tree-lined streets, seemed to conceal a multitude of dark secrets. Secrets guarded jealously by the very people who were now her potential targets. Each interaction was a carefully planned dance around the truth, each smile a mask. A new piece of evidence emerged from her deeper analysis. In one of the interviews, a seemingly insignificant detail now stood out. A mention of a late-night phone call received by Mr. Blackwood on the night of his death. The caller's identity was never confirmed. In the police report, it was simply dismissed as an irrelevant detail, but Sarah's trained ear caught a slight tremor in the voice of the person describing the call. This suggested nervousness, a cover-up perhaps. This forgotten detail, a tiny fragment of information, had the potential to upend the official narrative entirely. Could this phone call have been crucial, or was it even more deliberate omission? Days blended to nights as Sarah immersed herself in the tapes, the sound of the cassette player's whirring becoming the soundtrack to her obsession. The more she listened, the more she pieced together, the more disturbing the picture became. She started to suspect that Mr. Blackwood's death was not a simple suicide, but a calculated act. The original police investigation had been rushed, superficial. Vital information had been ignored, possibly deliberately. Sarah believed that someone had deliberately crafted a false narrative, constructing a scene to deceive the authorities. The meticulously detailed interviews she had found were rich with clues and omissions. Each interview was a layered narrative, with truth intertwined with falsehood, revealing a pattern of concealment and manipulation. It dawned on her that the truth was not just buried, it was actively being suppressed. The cover-up was systematic, meticulously crafted, and involving several individuals who seemed determined to safeguard their secrets. The weight of this revelation pressed heavily on Sarah. The investigation was no longer a simple quest for justice. It was a battle against a formidable and well-organized conspiracy. Her suspicion intensified as she delved deeper into the tapes. The seemingly insignificant details, a mumbled phrase, a forced laugh, a subtle change in vocal tone, all took on new significance when viewed in their context. She found herself constructing a different timeline of events, a timeline that drastically differed from the official police report. This newly formed timeline painted a picture that was chilling in its implications, suggesting a far more sinister plot than she had initially suspected. The deeper she ventured, the more dangerous the situation became. The constant surveillance continued, its subtle presence a constant reminder of the threat she faced. The Dark Satan had become a symbol of the unseen forces actively working against her, a chilling embodiment of the conspiracy she was uncovering. The once comforting quiet of Havenwood was now replaced with a sense of foreboding, a feeling of being watched and shadowed. She found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see the dark car, its enigmatic presence lingering in the shadows. The more she unraveled, the more she realized that her investigation was threatening the very fabric of Havenwood's social structure. She was not just uncovering a murder. She was uncovering a web of lies that had held the town together for 2 decades. She was disturbing a carefully constructed piece, a piece that was built upon deceit. The sense of impending danger was palpable, the weight of her investigation growing heavier with every passing hour. Yet, Sarah's determination burned brighter than ever before. The fear she felt was a mere shadow compared to the fire of her resolve. The truth, however dangerous, would be uncovered. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Havenwood as Sarah pulled up to Mark Olson's house. It was a deceptively ordinary dwelling, a picture of suburban tranquility that belied the turmoil brewing within its walls. A knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. This was it, the moment of truth. She had spent weeks piecing together the fragments of the past, unraveling the carefully woven tapestry of lies, and now she was about to confront the man she believed was at the heart of it all. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped onto the porch, the familiar scent of freshly cut grass doing little to soothe her nerves. The doorbell chimed, a sharp, metallic sound that echoed the tension in her own chest. Moments later, Mark opened the door, his face betraying a flicker of surprise before settling into a practiced mask of polite indifference. He was dressed in casual clothes, his appearance carefully cultivated, but Sarah noticed a slight tremor in his hand as he reached for the door handle, a small detail, but one that spoke volumes. "Sarah?" he said, his voice carefully modulated, lacking its usual jovial tone. "What a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to talk to you, Mark," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the meticulously clean interior, the overly perfect arrangement of furniture, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling within her. The house felt strangely sterile, almost devoid of personality, as though it were a meticulously crafted facade. Mark led her to the living room, his movements stiff and controlled. He offered her a seat, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent challenge in their depths. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "About Mr. Blackwood's death," Sarah began, her voice low and deliberate. "I've been doing some digging, and I've uncovered some inconsistencies." Mark's composure wavered only slightly. "Inconsistencies? What inconsistencies?" he asked, his voice maintaining its carefully constructed veneer of calm. Sarah laid out her findings, meticulously detailing the discrepancies she had discovered in the original police interviews, the overlooked details, the subtle shifts in tone, the carefully constructed alibis. She described the late-night phone call, the barely perceptible tremor in the voice of the person who had reported it, and the newly discovered evidence connecting Mark to Mr. Blackwood in the week leading up to his death. She spoke of the hidden resentments, the simmering jealousies, the web of deceit that had shrouded Havenwood for 2 decades. As Sarah spoke, Mark's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. His eyes darted nervously around the room, his hands fidgeting, betraying the strain he was under. The calm demeanor he had initially presented was replaced by a growing unease, his carefully controlled expression cracking under the weight of Sarah's revelations. "You've got the wrong end of the stick, Sarah," he finally said, his voice edged with a hint of desperation. "This is all just coincidence." "Coincidence?" Sarah repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. "Mark, I've listened to those tapes. I've seen the patterns. I know you were involved." The carefully constructed mask finally shattered. Mark's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and anger, his controlled demeanor replaced by a raw, almost animalistic desperation. "It wasn't like that," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the ticking clock. "It wasn't murder. It was an accident. A terrible accident. An accident." Sarah pressed, her voice hard. "He was found hanging from a tree, Mark. That doesn't sound like an accident." Mark hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. He began to speak, his words tumbling out in a rush, a confession veiled in half-truths and carefully chosen words. He admitted to having a strained relationship with Mr. Blackwood, fueled by a mixture of resentment and jealousy. He confessed to having argued with the counselor on the night of his death, a heated exchange that had escalated into a physical altercation. He explained that in the ensuing struggle, Mr. Blackwood had fallen, hitting his head. Panic had seized him, and in his desperation, he had attempted to stage the scene to look like suicide. But his confession revealed more than just the events of that night. It unveiled a darker, more complex truth about Mr. Blackwood himself. Mark spoke of the counselor's hidden life, his secret dealings, his manipulation of students, and the web of deceit that he had woven around himself. He spoke of blackmail, threats, and the unspoken pressures that had driven him to desperate measures. The idyllic image of Havenwood's beloved counselor was shattered, replaced by a portrait of a man far more sinister than Sarah could have imagined. Mark's confession, while painting a clearer picture, also raised more questions. He mentioned others involved in covering up the truth, individuals who had profited from Mr. Blackwood's manipulation and who were now desperately trying to protect their own secrets. The web of lies was far more intricate, more far-reaching than Sarah had ever imagined. This wasn't just a single act of violence. It was a systematic cover-up involving multiple players, each with their own motives and secrets. The afternoon light began to fade, casting long, eerie shadows across the room, mirroring the deepening shadows of Havenwood's secrets. Sarah left Mark's house, the weight of her discovery pressing heavily upon her. She had confronted Mark, and in doing so, she had uncovered a truth far more complex and dangerous than she could have ever anticipated. The seemingly idyllic town of Havenwood was now revealed as a place steeped in deceit, a place where the truth was buried deep beneath layers of carefully constructed lies. And she was determined to unearth every last one of them. The chilling revelation from Mark Olson's confession hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket woven from half-truths and unspoken fears. His admission of a physical altercation with Mr. Blackwood, followed by a panicked attempt to stage the scene as a suicide, was a horrifying glimpse into the darkness lurking beneath Havenwood's pristine surface. But it was far from the whole story. He spoke of others, shadowy figures whose names were whispered with hushed tones, their involvement wrapped in a web of carefully constructed alibis and veiled threats. Sarah found herself relentlessly drawn back to the high school, a place of youthful memories now tainted with a chilling sense of foreboding. The hallways, once vibrant with the laughter and anxieties of teenagers, now echoed with the ghost of Mr. Blackwood's presence, his unseen gaze seeming to follow her every move. She revisited the familiar classrooms, each one holding its own layer of unspoken secrets. The homeroom, where she'd sat beside Mark Olson, felt particularly oppressive, the air thick with the residue of past betrayals. The library, where Mr. Blackwood had spent countless hours, felt eerily silent, the hushed atmosphere now laced with the weight of his hidden life. Her investigation led her to Emily Carter, a classmate who had always been close to Mr. Blackwood, a favored student whose academic achievements were legendary. Emily, now a successful lawyer in a nearby city, initially denied any involvement. Yet, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor, a fleeting flicker of unease in her eyes that spoke volumes. The meticulously crafted composure Emily projected couldn't quite conceal the tremor in her voice whenever Mr. Blackwood's name was mentioned. The carefully rehearsed answers eventually gave way to a hesitant confession. A confession born not out of guilt, but out of fear. Emily revealed a clandestine relationship with Mr. Blackwood, a secret affair that had spanned several years. He had been her mentor, her confidant, a figure she deeply admired until the truth began to unravel. Emily revealed that Mr. Blackwood was not just a kind and gentle counselor, but a man who used his position of trust to manipulate and control those around him, twisting their vulnerability to his advantage. She'd been one of his many victims, entangled in a web of emotional blackmail and manipulative control. The details she revealed added another layer to the complex tapestry of deceit that was slowly being unveiled. Mr. Blackwood was a master manipulator, creating a facade of goodness that concealed a ruthless and calculating nature. The local diner, a haven for gossip and rumors, became Sarah's unexpected office. Over mugs of lukewarm coffee, she pieced together fragments of conversations, snippets of information that hinted at a far more elaborate scheme than she initially imagined. Conversations she overheard spoke of favors exchanged, debts unpaid, and resentments simmering just beneath the surface of Havenwood's placid exterior. She discovered a complex network of relationships, some seemingly innocuous, others deliberately obscured, all woven together by a shared secret that they had worked tirelessly to keep buried. As Sarah delved deeper, she discovered a pattern of financial irregularities connected to the school's accounts, anomalies that had been overlooked or dismissed over the years. Mr. Blackwood had been embezzling funds, a considerable sum that had remained undetected until Sarah began her investigation. The money, she suspected, had been used to keep his secret life afloat, providing him with the means to maintain his web of deceit and control. The people who had benefited from his machinations were now desperately working to cover their tracks, fearful of the consequences if their involvement were exposed. The town itself began to feel like a character in the story, its seemingly idyllic facade cracking under the weight of Sarah's investigation. The once comforting familiarity of Havenwood's streets and houses now felt oppressive, claustrophobic, as if the town itself were actively conspiring to conceal its secrets. Each location, the quiet, tree-lined streets, the meticulously maintained gardens, the quaint shops on Main Street, became a potential site of clandestine meetings, hidden rendezvous, and hushed conversations. The serene landscape now felt menacing, the beauty of nature masking a dark and insidious truth. One night, while reviewing old yearbooks, Sarah noticed a recurring theme: the presence of specific individuals in various school events and social gatherings, individuals who had connections to Mr. Blackwood and who were now centrally involved in the cover-up. This pointed towards a pre-planned conspiracy, a deliberate effort to maintain the appearance of normalcy while concealing the true nature of Mr. Blackwood's death. These weren't random coincidences, but deliberate arrangements designed to create a carefully constructed narrative. Her investigation led her to the Havenwood Country Club, a place where Havenwood's elite gathered for social events and clandestine meetings. Sarah spent days observing, blending in with the well-heeled residents, listening to conversations, and piecing together fragments of information. She witnessed subtle exchanges between individuals who had been close to Mr. Blackwood, conversations filled with veiled threats and unspoken anxieties. Their clandestine meetings, held in quiet corners and hushed tones, suggested a shared fear of exposure. Sarah discovered that Mr. Blackwood had not only manipulated students, but also influential members of the community. He had used his position of trust to gain access to confidential information, leveraging it for his personal gain. His network of manipulation extended beyond the high school walls, reaching into the heart of Havenwood's power structure. The people who had benefited from his actions, people who had kept silent to protect their own reputations, were now threatened by the resurgence of the investigation. The weight of her discoveries pressed heavily upon Sarah. The quaint town she once knew was now a labyrinth of lies and deceit, a place where secrets thrived and the truth was a dangerous commodity. She understood that her investigation was not simply about solving a 20-year-old murder. It was about exposing a network of manipulation and control that had permeated Havenwood for far longer. The closer she got to the truth, the more danger she found herself in, and she felt the palpable weight of the town's collective wrath. The web of deceit was far more extensive than she could have ever imagined. The worn, leather-bound diary lay open on Sarah's desk, its yellowed pages whispering secrets from the past. It belonged to Mr. Blackwood, discovered tucked away in a hidden compartment of his old desk in the school's storage room. The meticulous script detailed not just his academic achievements and personal anxieties, but a clandestine network of relationships that extended far beyond the high school walls. Names appeared repeatedly, names that were familiar to Sarah. Members of the Havenwood community, people she had known, respected, or simply observed from afar. Among them, Mayor Thompson, a pillar of the community known for his unwavering moral compass, and Reverend Miller, whose sermons echoed with piety and unwavering faith. Their presence in Mr. Blackwood's private journal, intertwined with cryptic references and coded messages, painted a picture far more disturbing than a simple cover-up. One entry, dated just weeks before his death, caught Sarah's attention. It spoke of a debt that needed to be repaid, a secret that must remain buried. Accompanying the entry was a meticulously drawn map, marking a specific location on the outskirts of Havenwood, a secluded area known locally as Widow's Creek. Sarah recognized the area instantly. As a child, it had been a forbidden place, shrouded in local folklore and whispered stories of tragedy. Now, it held a far more sinister significance. That evening, under the cloak of darkness, Sarah made her way to Widow's Creek. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the silence broken only by the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. The map led her to a crumbling stone well, half hidden beneath overgrown vegetation. She peered down into the darkness, the cold air rising to meet her. It was then that she saw it. A glint of metal reflecting the faint moonlight. A discarded object half buried in the mud at the well's base. With trembling hands, Sarah retrieved the object. It was a small, tarnished silver locket, engraved with a single initial, E. The locket contained a faded photograph of a young woman, a woman Sarah recognized immediately. It was Emily Carter, her former classmate, the same Emily who had confessed to her affair with Mr. Blackwood. The photograph was not a recent one. It depicted Emily as a teenager, her face framed by long, dark hair, her eyes filled with an almost naive hope. The image was starkly at odds with the image of the sophisticated lawyer Sarah had interviewed. The discovery of the locket shifted the narrative, forcing Sarah to revisit her assumptions. Emily's confession had seemed genuine, her fear palpable. But the locket suggested a far more sinister role. It hinted at a deeper connection between Emily and Mr. Blackwood, a connection far beyond a simple clandestine affair. The locket became a physical representation of the hidden truths that had been concealed for 20 years. Sarah returned to the high school, a sense of dread washing over her. This time, she didn't just focus on the present. She delved into the past, reviewing old student records, photographs, and transcripts. She spent hours in the library, poring over yearbooks, painstakingly piecing together the connections between individuals. She discovered that Mr. Blackwood had a knack for selecting certain students as his confidants. Students who were either academically gifted, emotionally vulnerable, or both. He cultivated these relationships, offering support and mentorship while subtly gaining their trust. Emily, she realized, had been one of many. The narrative shifted back to the days leading up to Mr. Blackwood's death. Based on the diary entries, Sarah reconstructed a chilling sequence of events. She discovered that Mr. Blackwood had uncovered a significant embezzlement scheme involving the school's funds. A scheme orchestrated by several influential members of the community, including Mayor Thompson and Reverend Miller. They had used their positions to siphon money from the school's budget over several years, using their influence to ensure that no one noticed the discrepancy. Mr. Blackwood had apparently discovered their scheme and threatened to expose them unless they paid him a large sum of money. The debt mentioned in his diary was not a simple financial obligation, but a debt of silence. The secret was not an individual secret, but a collective one. A secret that bound them all together. The locket, Sarah realized, was a symbol of that secret, representing the price Emily paid for her complicity. Her role was not merely that of a mistress, but a silent accomplice, ensuring the scheme continued while protecting the community's reputation. Sarah spent days revisiting Mr. Blackwood's office, meticulously searching for clues. The office, once filled with the warmth of student interactions, now felt sterile and cold. Behind a loose panel in the wall, she found a hidden compartment containing numerous documents, including shredded letters and financial records. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, providing a clear picture of the community's dark secret. The meticulous records detailed the elaborate scheme and the roles each individual played in maintaining it. Sarah pieced together the narrative of that fateful night. Mr. Blackwood, in an attempt to extort more money from his accomplices, threatened to expose them. The group, panicked and desperate to protect themselves, met with him in a clandestine gathering, the location marked on the map Sarah had found in the diary. A struggle ensued, culminating in Mr. Blackwood's death, staged to look like a suicide. Emily, bound to them by fear and complicity, helped them cover up the crime. The locket, a symbol of their shared secret and the price of her silence, was discarded at Widow's Creek. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The idyllic town she once cherished had been built on a foundation of deceit, its serene beauty masking a dark and sinister truth. The people she had once respected, the pillars of the community, were revealed to be accomplices in a horrific crime. The weight of her discovery was immense, a crushing burden that threatened to overwhelm her. The case was no longer simply about solving a 20-year-old murder. It was about exposing the corrupt heart of Havenwood, a town where secrets thrived and the truth was a dangerous commodity. The realization that her investigation had led her to uncover a far-reaching conspiracy, far more extensive and sinister than she could have imagined, sent a chill down her spine. The quaint, tree-lined streets, the welcoming faces, and the comforting sense of familiarity all now held a new, chilling significance. The tranquility she once knew had been shattered, replaced by a palpable sense of unease and the ominous realization that the town's charming facade masked a treacherous undercurrent. The danger was not just in the uncovering of the truth, but in the potential backlash from a community now exposed for its deepest, darkest secrets. Sarah knew that her investigation was far from over. The fight for justice had just begun, and the fight could very well cost her life. The flickering neon sign of the Havenwood Diner cast a sickly yellow glow on the rain-slicked street. Inside, Sarah stirred her lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste mirroring the growing unease in her gut. The past few days had been a whirlwind of discoveries, each revelation more unsettling than the last. She'd uncovered a web of deceit so intricate, so deeply woven into the fabric of Havenwood, that the town itself felt like a character in a Gothic novel, its charming facade a carefully constructed mask. Her phone buzzed, the jarring sound cutting through the diner's quiet hum. It was an anonymous text. "You're digging too deep, Sarah. Some things are better left buried." The message sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't the threat itself, but the knowledge that someone was watching her, tracking her progress. The feeling of being watched had intensified since she'd started her investigation. She'd noticed subtle things. A car lingering down the street, a shadowy figure at the edge of her yard. Paranoia, she told herself, the product of too many late nights and too much caffeine. But a creeping dread, cold and persistent, clung to her like the dampness clinging to the ancient stones of Widow's Creek. Later that evening, as she reviewed the financial records she'd pilfered from Mr. Blackwood's hidden compartment, a car pulled up outside her childhood home. The headlights shone directly into her window, blinding her for a moment. When she looked again, the car was gone. It was a fleeting incident, easily dismissed as coincidence, yet it chipped away at her composure. The next day, Sarah decided to focus on Emily Carter. Emily's role in the cover-up was increasingly clear, yet her motivations remained shrouded in mystery. The locket, the faded photograph, the fear etched in her eyes during their earlier interview. These were all pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together neatly. Sarah knew she needed to talk to Emily again, but she also knew that the conversation would be fraught with danger. She found Emily at her law office, the elegant building a stark contrast to the small-town setting. Emily, impeccably dressed and composed, greeted her with a strained smile. The conversation was tense, stilted, punctuated by long, uncomfortable silences. Sarah carefully probed, offering Emily a chance to confess, to explain her involvement, but Emily maintained her wall of denial, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She spoke in carefully chosen words, weaving a narrative designed to deflect suspicion. Suddenly, the lights in the office flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. A scream pierced the silence, followed by a crash. Sarah fumbled for her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness, heavy and menacing. She felt a hand clamp down on her arm, pulling her towards the darkness. She struggled, her instincts screaming at her to fight back, yet the fear that had been slowly building inside her finally overwhelmed her. She was outmatched, vulnerable in the darkness. Fortunately, the struggle only lasted a few seconds. Then, a collective gasp of surprise broke through the darkness. The lights flickered back on, revealing a chaotic scene. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, and Emily, trembling and wide-eyed. A man stood in the doorway, his features obscured by the shadows, but his voice, harsh and authoritative, boomed through the silence. He released Sarah's arm, his gaze shifting from Sarah to Emily. He addressed Emily, his voice laced with barely suppressed anger. "You're getting careless, Emily," the man growled. "This needs to end." He didn't look at Sarah again. His words clearly addressed the danger he presented, a danger not just to Sarah, but to Emily as well. Sarah realized, with a cold certainty, that the man was the orchestrator of the cover-up, the one pulling the strings. He knew her investigation was getting dangerously close to the truth. He'd sent a clear warning, a message that extended beyond threats. It was an act of intimidation designed to halt her investigation. That night, Sarah slept little. She revisited the diary entries, studying the coded messages, searching for clues to the man's identity. She found a reference to a shadowy benefactor, a phrase that hinted at a more powerful player, someone who benefited greatly from the scheme. The following day, Sarah decided to take a different approach. Instead of directly confronting the community's hidden secrets, she decided to focus on the man's identity. She started by exploring Mayor Thompson's financial dealings, delving into public records and local business transactions. It was a slow, painstaking process, but she eventually uncovered a series of suspicious transactions linked to offshore accounts. The trail led to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, a company linked to several other seemingly unrelated businesses. It was a labyrinthine web of finances designed to conceal the true source of the money. Sarah realized that Mayor Thompson was not the top dog. He was merely a pawn. She needed to find the king. That night, while examining her research in the Havenwood Public Library, someone bumped her hard, sending her sprawling across a pile of old newspapers. As she looked up, she saw a familiar figure. It was the same shadowy figure that she had seen earlier. But this time, she had a better look at him. The dim light of the library didn't illuminate his face properly, but she could make out the outline of his expensive suit. His posture bespoke wealth and power. The man looked directly at Sarah, a chilling mixture of arrogance and menace in his eyes. He didn't speak, only gave her a long, unsettling stare before disappearing into the darkness of the library's depths. The stare felt like a threat. She could feel it on the back of her neck like a physical presence. He knew. Sarah knew she was getting closer to the truth, and with every step forward, the danger escalated. The town, once a place of comfort and familiarity, had become a hostile territory. The friendly faces of her childhood held a different meaning now. Some masks were falling. The people she thought she knew weren't who she thought they were. She now saw her hometown in a new and threatening light. She spent the next few days working from her childhood bedroom, the walls closing in, the familiar surroundings suddenly alien and threatening. The old house, previously a refuge, was now a constant source of anxiety and fear. Every creak, every shadow, whispered of danger lurking just beyond the walls. That night, she received another anonymous text. "Stop dating Sarah, or you'll regret it." Attached to the text was a photograph, a picture of her house, taken from across the street. The photo was clear, showing that someone was not just watching her home, but watching her specifically. Panic started to creep into her every action. She realized that the killer wasn't just targeting her, but also anyone close to her. She felt the need to protect her friends and family. Every sound, every movement made her heart pound in her chest. Her peaceful sanctuary had transformed into a prison of fear. The climax arrived unexpectedly. As Sarah was about to reveal her findings to the sheriff, a masked intruder broke into her house. A struggle ensued, a desperate fight for survival in the confines of her childhood home. The intruder was strong, relentless, their movements swift and deadly. Sarah fought back with all her might, her survival instinct overriding her fear. She knew that she was fighting for her life, and for the truth she had uncovered. Chapter ends with Sarah fighting for her life, the fate of Havenwood, and her own future hanging in the balance. The room is enveloped in darkness. The only sound is the fierce struggle and the clattering of objects. The final sentence hangs in the air, a cliffhanger leaving the reader breathless, the sound of desperate struggle fading into a suspenseful silence. The fight was far from over. The adrenaline coursing through Sarah's veins was a stark contrast to the icy fear that had gripped her moments before. The masked intruder, a blur of motion in the dim light of her childhood bedroom, had her on the floor, a brutal hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her desperate gasp. The air tasted of dust and old memories, a bitter blend that mirrored the situation. She could feel the weight of the intruder pressing down, a suffocating force that threatened to extinguish her breath, her will, her very life. She fought back, a primal instinct kicking in, overriding the paralyzing fear. Her fingers clawed at the intruder's arm, finding purchase on the rough fabric of their sleeve. A desperate struggle ensued, a silent ballet of violence played out in the suffocating darkness. Furniture crashed, glass shattered, the sounds echoing in the confined space like thunder. Each blow landed with a sickening thud, a testament to the ferocity of the fight. She tasted blood, a metallic tang mingling with the dust, unsure whether it was hers or the intruder's. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something smooth and cold. In the darkness, she felt around, her fingers tracing the outline of a familiar object. The old music box that sat on her dresser, a relic from her childhood. With a swift, desperate movement, she swung the music box, its brass edges catching the intruder's arm, eliciting a sharp cry of pain. The intruder staggered back, giving Sarah a precious moment to regain her footing. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat accompanying the chaos. She needed a weapon, something to level the playing field. Her eyes fell upon the antique baseball bat leaning against the wall, a treasured possession from her father. Grabbing it, she felt a surge of empowerment. It wasn't just a piece of wood, it was a symbol of strength and defense. The intruder, recovering from the blow, lunged again, their rage evident in their frenzied movements. This time, Sarah was ready. With a guttural scream, she swung the bat, connecting with a satisfying thud. The intruder stumbled, losing their balance, falling heavily to the floor. In the aftermath of the struggle, the room fell silent, the only sound the ragged gasps of her own labored breathing. Slowly, cautiously, Sarah approached the fallen figure, the baseball bat held defensively before her. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the window, she saw the intruder's mask fall away, revealing the face of a person she knew intimately. Mr. Blackwood, the seemingly harmless, affable owner of the Havenwood hardware store, his face contorted in pain and disbelief. The truth, brutal and undeniable, hit her with the force of a physical blow. The realization struck her with the force of a tidal wave. Mr. Blackwood had been the counselor's lover. The suicide note, the financial records, everything she'd uncovered pointed to a clandestine affair, a forbidden romance concealed behind a facade of respectability. The counselor's sudden death hadn't been a suicide, but a carefully orchestrated murder. Mr. Blackwood, driven by panic and desperation, had covered his tracks meticulously, weaving a web of deceit that had entangled the entire town. But why target her? The answer, she realized, lay in her investigation. She had unearthed the truth, and Blackwood, sensing that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble, had decided to eliminate her, the one person standing between him and complete impunity. He hadn't counted on her strength. He hadn't counted on her courage. The police arrived shortly after, sirens wailing, shattering the stillness of the night. As the officers apprehended Blackwood, his face a mask of defeated rage, Sarah leaned against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion, relief, and a lingering sense of unease. The truth was unveiled, but the scars of the night's events would take longer to heal. The following days were a blur of interviews, statements, and the painful process of recounting her ordeal. The town, once a picture of idyllic charm, was now reeling from the revelation of its dark underbelly. The secrets, long buried and carefully guarded, had come to light, leaving a trail of shattered reputations and broken lives in their wake. The police investigation confirmed Sarah's findings, detailing Blackwood's motive, his methods, and the extent of his deception. Even after the storm had subsided, a lingering tension remained, a palpable sense of unease that lingered in the air. The idyllic facade of Havenwood was forever marred, the cracks revealing a darker, more complex reality. The trial that followed was a spectacle, the details of the affair and the subsequent murder captivating the nation. Blackwood's conviction brought a sense of closure, but it couldn't erase the haunting memories of the confrontation. Sarah, hailed as a hero, moved back to the city, away from the shadows of Havenwood. She continued her work as an investigative journalist, but her experiences had changed her, forever shaping her perspective. The memory of that night, the chilling confrontation in her childhood bedroom, remained a stark reminder of the hidden truths that lurked beneath the surface of even the most seemingly tranquil communities. The town of Havenwood, once a place of cherished memories, was now associated with a haunting reality. The quiet streets and familiar faces were forever tainted by the revelation of the truth. The once peaceful haven had become a place where secrets and lies lurked beneath the surface, a place Sarah could never truly return to, but a place she could never truly forget. The experience had left an indelible mark, a constant reminder of the courage it took to uncover the truth, and the price she had paid for it. The cost of exposing the dark secrets of Havenwood was high, a toll that would accompany her long after the case was closed. The weight of the truth, once unearthed, could never be truly buried. The events had transformed Sarah. The once naive girl who had left Havenwood years ago returned a hardened woman, battle-scared but resolute. She had faced her deepest fears and emerged victorious. The experience had not only strengthened her resolve, but also ignited a fire in her, a determination to expose the truth wherever it lay hidden. While she left Havenwood behind, she carried its secrets, its lessons, and the unwavering belief in the power of truth within her. Emily Carter, initially implicated in the cover-up, emerged as a complex character, caught in a web of deceit and fear. Her testimony, though hesitant and laden with apprehension, proved crucial in the prosecution of Blackwood. The experience had left her scared, a victim of manipulation and coercion. Though not culpable in the murder itself, she bore the weight of complicity, a burden she would carry for the rest of her days. Mayor Thompson, initially perceived as a suspect, eventually faced charges related to financial irregularities unrelated to the murder. His association with Blackwood had created a web of deceit and corruption, revealing a deeper rot within Havenwood's administration. His downfall was a consequence of Sarah's investigation, exposing the layers of corruption that had thrived beneath the veneer of respectability. The investigation had revealed not only the murder of the counselor, but also a deeper malaise, a systemic failure within the community that had allowed such a terrible crime to occur and remain hidden for so long. The incident served as a wake-up call, prompting a thorough investigation into the town's leadership and practices. The town's charm could never erase the dark stain left by the events. The revelation served as a stark reminder that even in idyllic settings, darkness can lurk, its existence concealed behind masks of respectability and charming facades. In the end, Sarah's investigation had not just solved a murder, it had exposed a culture of secrecy and complicity. The truth, though painful and unsettling, had set Havenwood free from the shackles of its hidden past. The town began the slow and arduous process of healing, a journey paved with the lessons learned from the dark secrets it had kept hidden for far too long. The investigation's impact reverberated through the community, leading to much-needed reforms, transparency, and accountability. The incident remained a grim reminder of the importance of truth, justice, and the courage needed to unearth the darkest secrets. The cost was immense, but the ultimate victory belonged to the power of truth. The rain hammered against the attic window panes, mirroring the relentless drumming of Sarah's thoughts. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of her flashlight, illuminating the faded photographs and forgotten relics scattered across the dusty floorboards. She'd spent days poring over the police interviews, the counselor's personal journals, even the town's meticulously kept financial records, piecing together the fragments of a shattered life. Now, in the quiet solitude of the attic, the pieces were finally falling into place, revealing a motive as twisted and unsettling as the crime itself. It wasn't just about passion, or even revenge. It was about control. A chilling realization washed over Sarah, as cold and stark as the attic air. The counselor, Ms. Eleanor Vance, hadn't just been murdered. She'd been systematically silenced. Blackwood's actions weren't a spontaneous act of rage born from a broken heart. They were a calculated maneuver, a desperate attempt to maintain a precarious power structure built on lies and manipulation. A flashback, vivid and unexpected, swept over Sarah. She saw herself, a young, wide-eyed teenager, sitting in Ms. Vance's office, confiding in the counselor about a troubled friendship, a simmering conflict with Emily Carter. Ms. Vance, with her gentle voice and wise eyes, had listened patiently, offering solace and guidance. But there was something else in her gaze, a subtle hint of calculation. Sarah hadn't recognized it then, buried beneath the veneer of compassion. Now, it was starkly clear. Ms. Vance had used her position of trust to manipulate the town's power dynamics, subtly shaping alliances and controlling narratives. She'd known Blackwood, a man who hid behind a facade of affability and community service. He possessed a hidden ambition, a hunger for power he masked with charm and donations to local charities. He craved control, and Ms. Vance, with her connections and influence, had been instrumental in helping him achieve it. Their relationship wasn't merely a passionate affair, it was a strategic partnership, a calculated alliance aimed at securing power within the town. Their illicit romance had flourished in the shadows, fueled by a shared desire for influence. Ms. Vance's knowledge of the town's inner workings, its financial vulnerabilities, and its intricate social dynamics made her an invaluable asset to Blackwood. He'd been patiently grooming her, manipulating her, using her compassion and empathy to achieve his goals. He had played on her desire to make a difference, to leave a lasting impact on the community. He promised her power, influence, the ability to effect real change. But in reality, he had been using her. But Ms. Vance wasn't a passive participant. She had her own desires, her own ambition. Sarah realized she'd overlooked a critical detail in the original police reports. A small, almost insignificant entry detailing a significant land deal. A deal that greatly benefited Blackwood. The deal hinged on securing the support of influential town members. Ms. Vance, using her position and connections, had secured those critical votes. But the deal had a hidden clause, a detail buried within the fine print that Ms. Vance had recently discovered. A clause that would have exposed Blackwood's manipulation, his deceptive tactics. It was this discovery, Sarah concluded, that had led to her demise. The flashback intensified, bringing her to the night of Ms. Vance's death. She envisioned the counselor, her face a mask of horrified realization as she confronted Blackwood. The argument, the struggle, the ultimate betrayal. Blackwood, realizing the extent of Ms. Vance's discovery, had acted swiftly and decisively. He couldn't afford to let her expose his corruption. Her silence was crucial for maintaining his carefully constructed world. He had needed to maintain his power. The cover-up was equally meticulous. The staged suicide, the planted note, the manipulation of the original investigation. Blackwood had expertly woven a web of deceit, using his charm and influence to convince the police, the town council, and even Ms. Vance's closest friends, that her death was a tragic accident. Emily Carter, deeply affected by Ms. Vance's mentorship, played a crucial, albeit unwitting, role in the deception, providing the seemingly innocuous pieces that completed Blackwood's narrative. She believed the fabricated story, genuinely believing it was a tragedy, never suspecting the insidious truth behind it. Blackwood's motive was not solely driven by a clandestine affair gone wrong. It was a far more complex and sinister plot. It was about protecting his empire, his carefully constructed image, and his unyielding pursuit of power. He had used Ms. Vance, and then discarded her when she became a threat. The initial stages of Sarah's investigation, her seemingly harmless questioning and digging into the past, had set off alarm bells for Blackwood. He sensed her tenacity, her unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. That's when he realized she was a threat that needed eliminating. Sarah traced the path of Blackwood's ambition back through the town's history. His subtle influence extended beyond the land deal. He controlled the local newspaper, manipulated public opinion, and subtly influenced decisions within the town council. He had become the shadow puppeteer of Havenwood, his power growing gradually and invisibly over the years, a silent manipulator who had cleverly concealed his ambitions behind a mask of philanthropy. Ms. Vance's death had been a necessary sacrifice, a calculated move in Blackwood's relentless pursuit of power. She had become a liability, a potential threat to his carefully constructed world. By eliminating her, he ensured his continued reign. The town had remained oblivious to the man's machinations, blinded by his seemingly charitable acts and community involvement. Sarah's investigation not only uncovered a murder, but also exposed a systematic corruption, a web of deceit that ran deep within the seemingly idyllic town of Havenwood. Blackwood's motive transcended simple jealousy or revenge. It was a cold, calculated act of self-preservation driven by an insatiable hunger for power and control. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the dust of the past, but the chilling truth remained, etched forever in the annals of Havenwood's history. The killer's motive wasn't just about a lover's betrayal. It was about the chilling ambition of a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his dominion over a town that blindly trusted him. And Sarah, the girl who had once sought refuge in Havenwood, had become the woman who shattered its carefully crafted illusion of innocence. The town would never be the same. The weight of that truth settled heavily upon her, a burden she would carry long after she left Havenwood behind, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly idyllic communities. The cost of uncovering the truth was high, but the victory was bittersweet, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease and the knowledge that some scars never fully heal. The attic air, thick with the scent of dust and decay, seemed to hold its breath as Sarah pieced together the final fragments of the puzzle. The land deal, the seemingly innocuous articles in the local paper penned by Blackwood himself, praising Ms. Vance's dedication to the community, all meticulously crafted pieces of a larger deception. Blackwood hadn't just killed Ms. Vance. He'd orchestrated a masterful cover-up, silencing anyone who might have posed a threat to his carefully constructed image. Her investigation led her to the Havenwood Gazette, a small-town newspaper seemingly harmless but strategically controlled by Blackwood. Years of articles, editorials, and carefully placed obituaries painted a picture of Blackwood as a benevolent benefactor, a pillar of the community. Sarah spent hours poring over microfiche, tracing his influence back through decades, finding subtle manipulations in seemingly insignificant news pieces, carefully crafted to shape public opinion and bolster his image. He had been building his empire brick by brick, carefully cultivating relationships and subtly influencing decisions, always remaining just out of reach, never leaving a trail of incriminating evidence. Next, she delved into the town council records, discovering a pattern of suspicious votes, decisions favoring Blackwood's interests always appearing to be unanimous. Closer examination revealed that several council members had received significant donations to their personal or family businesses around the same time as key votes. Blackwood's influence wasn't overt. It was subtle, a quiet manipulation that had gone unnoticed for years. He played the role of the generous benefactor, hiding his manipulative tactics behind a facade of community spirit. The seemingly insignificant favors, the subtle nudges, the carefully crafted relationships, all contributed to the tapestry of his control. Even the police investigation had been compromised. Sarah discovered that the lead detective on Ms. Vance's case had been quietly pressured, receiving an unexpected promotion shortly after ruling the death a suicide. The detective's file contained a cryptic note mentioning a higher-up who insisted on the suicide ruling. A simple phone call, a carefully worded suggestion, a subtle threat. Blackwood's reach extended even into the town's law enforcement. The system, Sarah realized, had been rigged to protect him. The quiet, unassuming Emily Carter, once a student of Ms. Vance's, now a successful lawyer, held a crucial piece of the puzzle. While Emily had been unaware of the extent of Blackwood's manipulations, she had unwittingly played a key role in the cover-up. Deeply affected by Ms. Vance's death, Emily had provided seemingly harmless details, believing them to be true, which helped solidify the narrative of a tragic suicide. The grief and shock of Ms. Vance's death had blinded her, making her an easy pawn in Blackwood's game. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for Emily, trapped in a web of lies not of her own making. The final piece fell into place during a late-night visit to the old Vance family home, now vacant and overgrown. Sarah discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Inside, she found a series of letters between Ms. Vance and a lawyer, detailing her growing concerns about the land deal and Blackwood's increasingly erratic behavior. The letters detailed a plan to expose Blackwood, a plan that was abruptly cut short by her death. Ms. Vance had been brave, perceptive, and determined to right the wrongs she had witnessed. Her determination to unveil Blackwood's corruption had ultimately cost her her life. The truth was a tapestry woven from threads of ambition, betrayal, and fear. Blackwood, the seemingly benevolent face of Havenwood, was revealed to be a puppet master, pulling the strings of the town, controlling its narrative, and silencing anyone who dared to challenge his authority. He had built his empire on deceit, manipulating the system, and exploiting the trust placed in him by the community. Ms. Vance's death was not a tragic accident. It was a calculated act, a necessary sacrifice in Blackwood's relentless pursuit of power. The revelation of the conspiracy wasn't a neat, easily packaged story. It wasn't simply about a lover's quarrel turned deadly. It was a systemic corruption, a decay that had eaten away at the core of Havenwood, leaving its inhabitants vulnerable and deceived. Sarah understood the weight of her discovery, the implications of exposing such a deeply entrenched network of lies. The confrontation with Blackwood wasn't a dramatic showdown, but a quiet, chilling exchange in his impeccably maintained study, overlooking the town he had so expertly controlled. His facade of calm shattered as Sarah presented him with the evidence she had meticulously collected. He attempted to deny, to deflect, to manipulate, but the truth, laid bare before him, was undeniable. His carefully constructed world, built on lies and deceit, was crumbling around him. The aftermath wasn't a triumphant celebration, but a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding trust and transparency in Havenwood. Blackwood's arrest was followed by a flurry of investigations, exposing the systemic corruption that had permeated the town's institutions. The town council was reorganized, the local newspaper was placed under independent management, and the police department underwent a thorough reform. The town's secrets were out in the open, a harsh reality that would take years to heal. As Sarah left Havenwood, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, or so it seemed. The scars of the past remained, etched into the fabric of the town, a reminder of the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface. Havenwood would never be the same. The idyllic facade was gone, replaced by a community grappling with the truth, forced to confront the shadow of its past and rebuild its future on a foundation of honesty and transparency. Sarah carried the weight of her discovery, the knowledge that even in the most seemingly perfect places, darkness can flourish. The sense of closure wasn't absolute. The lingering unease remained, a reminder of the fragility of truth and the enduring power of hidden agendas. But the truth, once unearthed, had the power to set Havenwood free, even if the scars of its past remained visible reminders of the price of deception. The town had a long road to recovery, a path paved with difficult truths and difficult choices. But the unveiling of Blackwood's conspiracy marked the beginning of Havenwood's journey toward healing. And Sarah, bearing witness to the darkness and the light, would continue to carry the weight of that truth, a constant reminder of the enduring power of the quest for justice. The story of Havenwood, once a secret whispered in hushed tones, had now become a testament to the strength of truth in the face of overwhelming deceit. The courtroom was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. Blackwood, his carefully constructed facade of composure finally crumbling, sat hunched over, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The weight of the evidence, meticulously presented by Sarah, hung heavy in the air. The forged documents, the manipulated land deals, the coerced witnesses, the subtly altered newspaper articles, all meticulously documented and irrefutably linked to him. His lawyer, a seasoned veteran known for his aggressive tactics, attempted to discredit Sarah, to sow seeds of doubt, but his efforts felt feeble, almost desperate, against the mountain of evidence she had amassed. The jury, composed of Havenwood residents, some of whom had been victims of Blackwood's manipulations, seemed to hang on every word, their faces etched with a mixture of shock, anger, and a dawning understanding. The years of deceit, the systematic corruption, the carefully cultivated illusion of benevolence. It all unraveled before them, revealing the true nature of the man they once revered. The verdict came swiftly, a unanimous guilty on all counts. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by a stunned silence. Blackwood, his face drained of color, stared blankly ahead, his carefully constructed world shattering around him. The weight of his actions, the consequences of his choices, finally crashed down upon him. The years of manipulation, the calculated deception, the silencing of dissent, all culminating in this single devastating moment. The gavel fell, a sharp, decisive sound that echoed the finality of justice. The aftermath was not a triumphant celebration, but a slow, agonizing process of healing. For Sarah, the victory was bittersweet. The uncovering of the truth had brought a sense of closure, but the emotional toll was profound. The years spent immersed in the darkness of Havenwood's secrets, the constant threat of danger, the weight of responsibility. It all left an indelible mark. She found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served, but the scars of her investigation ran deep, a reminder of the darkness she had faced and the lengths she had gone to expose it. The weight of responsibility, the knowledge that she had played a crucial role in unraveling the web of deception that had consumed Havenwood, was a burden she would carry for a long time. The community, too, was grappling with the aftermath. The revelation of Blackwood's crimes shattered the idyllic image they had held of their town. The trust placed in Blackwood, the belief in his benevolence, was replaced by a chilling awareness of his true nature, leaving a deep sense of betrayal and disillusionment. The years of manipulation had created a rift within the community, a divide between those who had blindly trusted Blackwood and those who had sensed something was amiss. The process of rebuilding trust, of mending the fractured relationships, would require time, patience, and a collective commitment to transparency and accountability. Emily Carter, initially a pawn in Blackwood's game, experienced a profound sense of guilt and self-reproach. Her unintentional contribution to the cover-up weighed heavily on her conscience. She sought to make amends, dedicating herself to promoting transparency and justice within the community. Her newfound understanding of the complexities of truth and the vulnerability of individuals facing powerful forces fueled her commitment to reform and rebuilding. The town council was reorganized, the members carefully vetted, ensuring integrity and transparency. The Havenwood Gazette was placed under new management, committed to ethical journalism and uncompromised reporting. The police department underwent a complete restructuring, focusing on community policing and accountability. The system, once rigged to protect Blackwood, was reformed, making it more responsive and responsible to the needs of the community. Havenwood was slowly beginning to heal, but the process was arduous, fraught with challenges and obstacles. The trial itself became a pivotal point in Havenwood's history. It wasn't just about holding Blackwood accountable. It was about confronting the systemic issues that had allowed him to thrive. The town learned painful lessons about the importance of vigilance, the dangers of unchecked power, and the need for open communication and accountability. The process of rebuilding trust wasn't easy. It required honest conversations, apologies, and a collective commitment to transparency. The impact of Ms. Vance's death extended beyond the immediate circle of her family and friends. The town mourned the loss of a dedicated educator and a compassionate soul who had dared to challenge the status quo. Her legacy became a symbol of the fight against corruption, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming power, the truth could prevail. Her memory became a catalyst for positive change, inspiring residents to fight for a more just and equitable Havenwood. The healing process was not linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and lingering tensions. Old wounds reopened, and long-buried resentments surfaced. But the community, slowly but surely, began to rebuild. Support groups formed, providing a safe space for people to share their experiences and process their emotions. Community events and initiatives aimed at fostering reconciliation and rebuilding trust were organized. The journey towards healing wasn't easy. It was marked by conflict, reconciliation, and a gradual rebuilding of trust and community spirit. Sarah, having witnessed the complexities of justice and the long road to healing, left Havenwood with a sense of profound sadness, but also of cautious hope. The town had confronted its dark secrets, and the wounds were still raw. But there was a palpable sense of new beginnings, a willingness to confront the past and build a brighter future, built on the foundations of honesty and transparency. The story of Havenwood wasn't a simple fairy tale. It was a complex saga of betrayal, deception, and the long, arduous journey towards redemption. It was a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The rain had stopped, washing away the dust and grime of the past. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the town. Havenwood was still scared, but it was also stronger, more resilient, more aware of the importance of truth and the value of community. The idyllic facade was gone, replaced by a landscape of healing, of growth, and of the enduring power of human resilience. The shadow of Blackwood's crimes would linger, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of vigilance. But it was also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the pursuit of justice, however arduous, could ultimately lead to healing and renewal. And in the quiet moments, amidst the rebuilding, a new sense of unity and understanding blossomed, a testament to the strength and enduring spirit of the people of Havenwood. The journey towards full healing would take years, even decades. The first steps had been taken toward a future forged in the crucible of truth and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The Greyhound bus rumbled along the highway, the rhythmic hum a counterpoint to the quiet turmoil within Sarah. Havenwood, with its shadowed corners and lingering secrets, receded in her rearview mirror, a tapestry of memories, both painful and triumphant, woven into its landscape. She watched the familiar shapes of the rolling hills blur into an indistinguishable green expanse, a fitting metaphor for the blurring edges of her past self and the woman she was becoming. The trial, the victory, the weight of revelation. It all felt like a distant dream, a chapter closed, still resonating within the chambers of her heart. Leaving Havenwood wasn't easy. It was a place etched into her very being, a landscape that had witnessed her childhood, her anxieties, her triumphs, and the harrowing descent into the underbelly of its seemingly perfect facade. She carried with her the ghosts of Ms. Vance's gentle smile, the sting of Blackwood's lies, and the lingering shadows of Emily's conflicted gaze. Each face, each memory, served as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both cruelty and kindness, for deception and redemption. But amidst the bittersweet farewell, there was a sense of liberation. The burden of secrecy, the constant fear, the sleepless nights spent poring over documents and piecing together fragments of truth, all of it had been laid to rest. Justice had been served, not just for Ms. Vance, but for the entire community. Havenwood was beginning to heal, to shed its cloak of deceit and emerge, tentatively, into the sunlight. Her new apartment in the city was small, but it held a different kind of quiet. A quiet born not of fear, but of hope. The city itself was a vibrant contrast to the sleepy stillness of Havenwood. The constant hum of activity, the diverse tapestry of faces, the endless possibilities. It felt liberating, a stark departure from the claustrophobia that had enveloped her for so long. She had secured a position at a major metropolitan newspaper, a far cry from the small-town gazette. The pressure was immense, the competition fierce, but it was a challenge she embraced. The experience in Havenwood had honed her skills, sharpened her instincts, and instilled in her an unwavering commitment to the truth. She was no longer just a small-town journalist, but a seasoned investigator, equipped with the knowledge of the human heart's capacity for both darkness and light. The city held a different kind of anonymity than Havenwood's suffocating familiarity. Here, she could be Sarah, the journalist, without the weight of her past or the watchful eyes of her neighbors. She could simply exist, breathe, and focus on her work, unburdened by the ghosts of Havenwood. Yet, the lessons she learned in Havenwood remained, etched not just in her memory, but in the very fabric of her being. She had learned that truth often resides in the shadows, buried beneath layers of deceit and half-truths. She had learned the importance of perseverance, the courage required to confront power, and the profound impact of uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. She had witnessed firsthand the ripple effect of lies, the erosion of trust, and the arduous journey toward healing and reconciliation. But she had also witnessed the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the enduring power of community. She had seen the residents of Havenwood, shaken but not broken, rise from the ashes of betrayal and begin to rebuild their lives. Their collective journey towards healing had filled her with a quiet sense of awe. This journey was a testament to their unwavering belief in justice and their commitment to confronting their past. The city nights were filled with the sounds of distant sirens, the distant echoes of the world's problems. But here, surrounded by the anonymity of millions, Sarah found a different kind of solace. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of Havenwood, but the purposeful quiet of a life dedicated to exposing the truth, no matter where it led. Her new job offered both challenges and rewards. The pace was faster, the stakes higher. The stories she uncovered were complex, often disturbing, but each investigation was a journey of discovery. Each truth unearthed a testament to the power of her persistence. She worked late into the night, surrounded by the glow of her computer screen, the words flowing from her fingertips, the narratives unfolding on the page. She found a certain satisfaction in uncovering injustices, in giving voice to the voiceless, in holding the powerful accountable. It was a far cry from the small-town drama of Havenwood, but the essence of her work remained the same. A pursuit of truth, a dedication to justice. She had traded the familiar landscape of her hometown for the expansive, unknown city, but her core values had not changed. Years passed. Sarah continued her work, her life unfolding in a new chapter, far removed from Havenwood's secrets, yet deeply influenced by its lessons. She never forgot Ms. Vance, nor the pain and turmoil that had driven her investigation. The memory served as a constant reminder of the importance of her work, the weight of responsibility that came with uncovering the truth. It was a reminder that even in a city of millions, one person could make a difference, one truth could change everything. The city, initially a symbol of anonymity, had gradually become her sanctuary. It was a place where she could hone her skills, where she could contribute to something larger than herself, where she could find purpose and fulfillment. Her experiences in Havenwood had been transformative, shaping her into a stronger, more resilient person. She had faced her fears, battled her demons, and emerged victorious. As the years turned into decades, Sarah looked back on Havenwood, not with regret, but with a deep sense of gratitude. It was a crucible that had tested her strength, her resolve, and her belief in justice. The town had been a catalyst for growth, a pivotal turning point in her life. She had faced darkness and emerged into the light, leaving behind the shadows of the past, but carrying the lessons learned forward into a future filled with promise. The ending was not a fairy tale, but a realistic portrait of growth and transformation. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of truth. The final page offered not a simple resolution, but a profound sense of peace, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey taken, and a hopeful anticipation of what lay ahead. The truth, however difficult to uncover, had prevailed, leaving behind a quiet sense of justice served and a renewed belief in the ability of individuals to make a difference in a world far bigger than the sleepy town of Havenwood. The rain had stopped, and the sun was shining again, not just on Havenwood, but on Sarah, her life now a new beginning.